Hey, what is happening, guys? Welcome back to Rule of Two Review, and today is a super special and very exciting day. I'm actually joined by Mr. Joey Ferris from Ferris Wheel Pro, and of course, SuperMetalDave, to discuss Metroid Prime 4 and all of our hopes and desires at length. Obviously, all three of us are huge Metroid fans and have discussed Metroid and Metroid Prime 4 several times on all of our respective channels. And I think a lot of people know us as being pretty big Metroid fans in the community. And this is something that we were kind of throwing around for a while, and we managed to find a way to make it happen. So what you're about to hear is a super epic and very long, it's like an hour long, a very, very long podcast where we discuss all of these different things that we hope to see happen in Metroid Prime 4, some good ideas, some bad ideas, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. It was a ton of fun. I really enjoyed being able to do this and get together with these guys, and I will of course link both of their channels below. Hopefully you already know them and are subscribed to them, but if you're not, definitely subscribe to the links below. And with that, enjoy this massive Metroid Prime 4 podcast. So yeah, I am here with my good buddy Joey Ferris.
Hello.
And of course, SuperMetalDave.
What's up?
And we are finally getting together as like the Metroid Geekdom Kingdom people to go over some Metroid Prime 4 stuff. I think people have been wanting us to get together and do some Metroid content for a while. So this is exciting to finally be doing this, guys.
Oh, it's super fun. I'm really excited to get going on this. Yeah.
Yeah, we keep getting messages on Twitter. Hey, when are you guys going to do a video together? You know, because we always do these cool Metroid videos, and it's been really fun.
I mean, we're all pretty big Metroid fans, right? We talk about it a lot on our channels. I've been trying to pump, Joey, all of your awesome Metroid content recently. You make just such good damn videos. And
oh, thanks.
Yeah, of course. And then Dave, you make awesome deep dives into like a lot of the visual stuff, the development side, all those things that I am way too stupid to understand. So I always appreciate how you kind of get into that stuff.
Yeah, I love that stuff. I just love diving deep into all that stuff and getting into all the details about what they're doing with the game and what could happen with what all the cool little things going on with it, with Retro Studios, especially with all the awesome talent they're hiring too. It's a lot of potential.
Dude, so much talent, so much talent. I'm really glad to see what they're doing there. So what we thought would be fun to do is to kind of get together with the three of us as big Metroid fans and discuss some of our big wishes and our hopes and our dreams and our desires for this game, this illustrious White Buffalo game that we don't even know if we'll play before any of us are even dead. But assuming we actually get the chance...
I hope I'm not dead soon. I can tell you that.
If
we die, we'll come back to life to play it. Trust me.
Just for it, yeah. This will be what resurrects us from the dead, is the release of this game. And so we all have a laundry list of things that we'd like to see in the game. Some maybe improvements on things that have already been in the first three games. Maybe some things that would be brand new additions to the game. So we're going to spend some time just kind of going over. What we did is each of us brought 3 ideas or wishes to the table for Metroid Prime 4 that we would like to see into the game, and we're just going to take turns kind of discussing each of our ideas and go through all 9 of these ideas and just kind of see what we might actually get right once the time actually comes where the game releases. So so I'm going to go ahead and I'll go first. I'm going to break the ice and bring up the first thing that I would like to see in the game. And of the 3, which is the first? I didn't decide which one I actually wanted to do first. I'm going to go really simple here. I'm going to say improved combat. And when I say improved combat, I don't necessarily mean that I think that the combat is bad in the first 3 Metroid Prime games. But I'll be curious to hear what you guys think. I do still find it to be very simple.
Yes.
Because, yeah, I mean, they're older games. They're from the early to mid-2000s, right? Even by the time they get to Prime 3 in 2007, it still has to be pretty uniformed and similar to the prior 2 games, so there isn't a whole lot of variety to what you can do. You get your arm cannon, and you get some different beams for that cannon, and then you get your missiles, and that's about it. You have the morph ball, you get the dodges left to right by using the jump button when you're targeted, stuff like that, but, there's not a whole lot of rhythm to the combat. If enemies close in on you, there's not a whole lot you can do, but just, start pressing the fire button super fast. And it's really just boils down to that and to missiles. I've tried to, and I've tried to think about what kind of things they could add without, just giving Samus like a bazooka and a machine gun. And I don't think any of us really want that, but I guess I think of the overall rhythm, the pace to the combat, the speed, the variety to Samus's moveset, or some different weapons we've never seen. stuff like that. So that's one of the things I'd like to see them kind of evolve in Prime 4. What do you guys think about that idea?
I think in Metroid Prime 3 they experimented with that a little bit, right? With like the grapple beam taking out the shields off. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I haven't played. Actually, that's the least of the 3 I played. But yes, I have played that game a few times. But the grapple beam could help you take the shields off of some enemies, and then you could basically just open it up to shooting them and killing them. So, yeah, I mean, there's definitely something they could do there besides just only shooting. And well, you mean charging? You got to charge your beam, and then
Charge,
of course,
yeah.
What they could do is make just a thought. What games have been doing lately is doing a lot of damage to certain body parts of enemies. So they could make it more strategic in that sense, where you're actually targeting certain body parts on certain enemies more than others. And maybe one part of their leg needs to be a charge beam, or then another part of their arm needs to be a missile. I don't know, like just making it more varied in that sense, and besides just shooting their chest and killing them,
Yeah, it's interesting because the way that combat was designed, it was designed around the unique controls of the game in general. Like, you go back and play them on the GameCube, and it's just like that game uses tank controls, like a different variation of tank controls, and it's just it was a very interesting thing for them to design around that control scheme, especially since they were working during a time when they were still trying to figure out console shooters on consoles, of course. And,
that's true, yeah.
And then especially that's why they put the lock-on in there. And the combat in Prime 4 is all going to depend on what type of control scheme they're going to use, and I'm pretty sure we're all thinking they're going to go and make it like a traditional console shooter, or unless they
like
give
a dual
us like
analog kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
like how shooters are controlled on controllers these days. But then maybe they'll give us an option to use the original controls, but then they'll have to design the game around both of those schemes, which probably won't work.
Yeah, what's interesting about that is have you tried playing these games on an emulator like Dolphin?
I haven't.
I have not, no.
Well, I mean, you can actually make it to play like a dual analog shooter, kind of like, and make it so you can look around almost like while you're moving. You can kind of modify it like that. So I've tried it like that, and it works. It does actually work pretty well. It's just a slight difference in how you look around and move and everything like that. So
have you ever tried it with like a mouse? Is there a way to play it on an emulator with a mouse?
Yeah, you can play with a mouse too. Especially the Wii Metroid Prime 3, you can make that, because a lot of people don't want to hook up the Bluetooth and the Wii remote to your PC. So you can make it full on mouse and keyboard, and that works pretty well, but the game wasn't designed for that, so it's kind of glitchy and wonky, but you can make it work.
Sure. Yeah.
But definitely, like, the freedom of aiming everywhere. Like, the whole excuse they had with Metroid Prime 1 was that, well, she's in a helmet and she can't look all the way up very well because it's real stiff and everything. And I was like, well, that makes sense, but like now that we've progressed, 20 years later, maybe they could add a little bit more movement to her head, and then you could also, obviously, you should be able to run and shoot and look around at the same time. I mean, you are.
Yeah, that's
Samus.
really true.
You should be able to do that.
That suit doesn't look like a classic Batman suit. She can move her neck. Yeah, I don't buy it one bit.
Yeah, she's definitely been a little bit kind of tanky and heavy feeling in all the games. Like they designed them around that, but when you compare her feel and weight and movement to other shooters, she does feel a little bit heavier in that respect. And I will say, Dave, you bring up the idea of like being able to target different parts of like enemy, like different limbs and stuff in their legs and their heads. It kind of makes me think of, there's a couple of boss fights in the games that kind of operate that way, right? Like Thardis or Moganar, where you're shooting different parts. And how cool would it be if they gave you like a specific visor that we might get into visor stuff, but like maybe part of the improved combat would be like a different kind of visor that would let you target different things on different enemies, something like that.
They almost did something like that in Metroid Prime 1 with those different visors for the X-ray and the what was the other one? There
was the X-ray.
Thermal.
There was
thermal
the
vision.
thermal. Yeah, I was going to call it heat vision. Yeah,
be the predator. So.
Exactly.
But I mean, but that wasn't necessarily like what you said. Like you could only see certain parts, because that reminds me of Resident Evil 4 with the those guys at the end of the game where you had to use that special scope to see the parasite on the. I forgot what those creatures are called.
Yes, I remember what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's a good idea. That's a really good idea, actually. I think they could go far with that, and that would actually help make it more varied too. And then you got to think a little bit extra about where you're going to target on enemies. Yeah, that could work. Sure.
Well, let's move on to the next one. Dave, if you want to go on your first big wish for Metroid Prime 4, what is that?
Okay, so hopefully this doesn't take away from Joey's. We might be thinking the same thing. I have a
shouldn't have gone last, Joey.
I should have. Right.
But I really do hope that the beams and missiles and visors not only can be found in the game, but also be upgraded further, like a more in-depth upgrade system in the weapon systems, almost like Doom Eternal and Doom 2016, in the sense where you get these weapons, but you don't just have the weapon, you're upgrading them and you're stacking like extra abilities onto the weapons. So you could do that a little bit in Metroid Prime 1 and everything. You add like the extra little like missile wave beam to it and everything like that. But you could, I'm thinking to go a step further, and that would also probably go into, I'm including this all in one here, so forgive me. That would also go into like maybe the quote unquote like money aspect, like what is the material resource you're going to collect in this game that you would actually be using to upgrade your beams and things like that. Maybe there's a certain thing you got to collect that you could build up that would actually increase certain powers of your beams, and you got to collect this certain part for this certain thing, and that could be something like a collectible type of thing that you would get to increase your abilities on each beam. And I do think they could add certain things, certain like layers to the beams that would be something that would be transformative later in the game, that you could go to different areas or kill enemies in a different way. And like a stacking type of thing, because the upgrade system that has been introduced in the past 20 years has been extremely varied for a lot of different games. So Doom is a good example. Even Jedi Fallen Order had a good example of that too, how you upgrade your character. You're talking about basically like an upgrade tree, right? That kind of idea. Yeah, kinda. Yeah, pretty much. But and like different tiers on each beam, like if you do this and you get this, you upgrade this part of your beam to this part, and maybe it's not necessary to beat the game to have all the upgrades on each beam, but for the guys like us who want to get all that stuff, that would be something really cool to like. You would want to explore everything in the game to get all these upgrades for your beams. I think that would be really cool to add that extra level of upgradableness, if you want to say, to your beams and your visors even.
Yeah, you totally did, like, not, I don't want to say take mine, because we actually did talk about this earlier before the discussion even started, but that kind of thing for me came when I was replaying BioShock recently on the Switch. And of course, the genre of BioShock and System Shock, Prey, those kind of games, immersion sims, I think they're called. Those obviously don't predate Metroid, and they don't they borrow from each other in certain aspects. And I feel like what you said, like Metroid Prime 4, can take a lot of the upgrade abilities of the weapons and powers in those games and bring it over into Prime 4, where you can also maybe not even just upgrade your beams, but also like all aspects of yourself, maybe even aspects of your suit, maybe increase armor or damage resistance, increase agility, stuff like that. Basically, like Rob said, a skill tree of sorts. And I think that would be, I think it's just, Metroid's kind of made for that, if you really think about it. Like, rather than just collecting the gear, you also can upgrade the gear, and I think that adds a whole lot of replayability to the game. Because right now, as I've been replaying the Prime Trilogy for my own video series, I'm thinking, wow, collecting stuff is fun, but I wish I could do more than just... I wish these puzzles would lead to more than just missile upgrades and energy tanks and, lots of missile upgrades in those games.
Yeah, like a real reward. Like, you're talking about getting real rewards.
Yes, exactly. And I think...
And a lot of those came from actually, like when you compare games of today, basically, a lot of those type of rewards come from beating certain challenges in these games. Maybe you kill a certain amount of enemies, or maybe you unlocked, something by beating a boss in a certain way. It's almost like an achievement for doing certain things in the game. You can unlock more things for your weapons. It actually would drive you to do better and play better. To maybe you beat the boss without dying, or maybe you beat the boss with a certain amount of health left or something like that. Just an idea.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Something to drive you to actually be better at the game, to upgrade certain things more than others, or what have you. I think that would be really interesting.
It's kind of like a light RPG element is sort of what we're talking about. Like, not necessarily exactly XP, but something like it. Especially when, Dave, you brought up an awesome idea with the currency or the material, right, the collectible stuff within the game that really no Metroid game has ever had, but that you use to your advantage to, soup yourself up, whether it's visor upgrades or weapon upgrades, suit upgrades, things like that. And it really boils down to something. I almost made this actually my own little bullet point, but I wasn't going to bring it up, and now you guys kind of did, but it just becomes more of an incentive to fight. Because really, in all the prior games, there's not much incentive to actually fight in the Metroid games. Like, it's fun, and obviously fighting and shooting and kicking ass as Samus is like part of the game, it's part of being Samus. But you're not really usually getting much out of it. You're just really getting enemies out of your way to get to where you're going.
Right.
But this could be something where, it wouldn't be. We've kind of already said this. It wouldn't be revolutionary to video games, but it would be new to Metroid to add a skill tree or a currency or an upgrade tree. And I especially love the specific idea of upgrading the visors. I feel like that's the number one area where there's a lot of room for this idea to really shine, where maybe there's 4 or 5 visors, just base visors she gets in this game, which already would actually be a lot. And then if each one of those could be upgraded, 3 or 4 times throughout the game, that can really take, the being Samus element to like many new levels in a current 2021, 2022, whatever release of a game. I just think that's awesome. I love that idea.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, and that combine that with the weapons too, like your beams and everything, and your missile upgrades, and even the missile cannon itself. Because how your beam changes a little bit to a cannon type of thing when you fire a missile.
Yeah.
I mean, that could be upgraded too and changed. So I mean, there's all kinds of stuff they can do with that. It could all be it could all be something like a risk reward type of aspect too. The more like enemies you face, the more rewards you get. Like you said, you're not just skipping enemies, because you see all the speed runs of Metroid Prime in these games. They just go right past enemies, and it's like, why are they having these enemies there?
Yeah,
if you're just going to skip them. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, that's a good one. Joey, you can go ahead and rock the first one that you have.
First one I have was pretty much what Dave had, essentially, was having that skill tree, because I do think it's important to kind of take that element from the other games that have come out in the past 400,000 years since Metroid Prime 3. So I think that would be a great element to have, really. But I don't really have much to add to that, except I do like the idea of making combat more of a rewarding feat than just, oh, get out of my way. I'm like trying to unlock this damn door because I've been through this area 14 times now.
Well, it's funny. The whole idea of fighting enemies in the games previously is like, well, I need life and I need missile ammo, or super missile ammo, which you usually only need because you're fighting enemies in the first place, with like the rare exception of open a door. So it's like, if you think about it, if you don't fight any enemies, you don't need to get life and you don't need to get missiles, right? So changing that.
Yeah. No, that goes back to your first point, Rob. More varied combat, because like you can remember how you do with Doom Eternal. You can actually choose how you fight these guys, right?
Yeah.
So basically, like if you kill a guy with your chainsaw, you get certain type of ammo drops or power up drops, and if you kill another guy another way, you get other type of things that drop from them. So it's kind of like a same kind of thing. Like you get ammo in that game, for example. So I think that's a good idea all around. Like now that I'm thinking about it, like how you kill enemies could be your reward also by getting certain, maybe that mineral or that currency we talked about. You would get that maybe from killing an enemy a certain way, and then you would get missiles and health from killing enemies a different way.
I love that idea. And what's also good is all of these ideas that we've talked about so far here in like whatever the first third of probably this video is the kind of stuff that I actually could really see Nintendo sort of doing. It kind of makes sense to evolve these few aspects that we've talked about, like the combat stuff, in a Metroid Prime 4 that doesn't completely change what the games have been leading up to it. You know, it's not like it becomes a totally different, unrecognizable game. It's just, you know, it's borrowing from some other things like BioShock or Doom and stuff, and really just implementing, hopefully, really good versions of that into Metroid Prime, but that wouldn't make it feel like it's not a sequel to the prior games, right?
Exactly.
I think that's pretty cool. Well, then I'll move on to the next one I have. I'll be really curious to hear what you guys say about this one. I've believed in this exact thing for so long, and I think people are split on it. My preference, it's kind of twofold. My preference would personally be for the game to take place on one planet, on one huge map, as opposed to what Prime 3 did, where they gave us a couple of different planets and a couple of small, way smaller maps on each of those planets. I liked that. I thought, you know, the idea was cool. I don't think anyone's going to complain about having more variety of planets and locations to go to. That's always good. But what they did really well with Prime 1 and 2 is, even though you were only on one planet, they gave you so many different locations that felt so crazy different that it didn't really matter that they were taking you to different planets. And in Prime 3, and I love Prime 3, don't get me wrong, I felt a little bit, it's ironic because it's like they gave you more technical locations to go to, but I felt like there was less ground to cover, less places to go, less real estate to walk across, and it also felt a lot more linear when they did that.
And it took forever to transition between those places.
Whereas
Prime
between,
1 and Prime 1 and 2, you hop into an elevator, you're there.
Yeah, it's like a 4-second elevator loading and you're done.
And I'm with you there. I think Prime 4 should be set on one planet because, like you said, all the areas in Prime 1 and 2, even though they were on the same planet, they were all extremely diverse. Like, I'm honestly surprised Talon 4 even had that many different areas, and the planet looks like an orange Mars planet. And I'm like, oh, you're telling me there's snow on this planet? I didn't see it.
That's on the other side of the model, of the visual model of the planet.
Which they never show. It's hilarious.
Now, for me personally, I don't have absolutely any problem at all with being on one planet, but I'll say what I'm going to say, I think, for my next point, because I have something to add about that. But that may I want to see what you guys think about it. So, but yeah, I wouldn't have any problem with staying on one planet.
Okay,
cool.
I will add one thing before we move on to that, Dave, is if they were going to give us multiple locations, I would of course still be okay with that. Like, I would trust them to do whatever they felt was the right thing to do. But I think it would also be cool if they maybe had us go back to some places we'd been before. I mean, wouldn't it be neat to have to go back to Talon 4? Like, what if there's like three new planets, but then, you know, there's also one of the other four planet you go to is also Talon 4, and you have to go back and forth between maybe different areas of Talon 4 and then also other new planets or something like that.
Wow, that's a great idea. Can you imagine that? Oh man, talk about
that's like when in Metal Gear Solid 4 when he goes back to Shadow Moses Island. That's just like, wow, nostalgia, tears rolling down my face.
Or imagine if you even had, actually, now that I think about it, what if you just went back to the Talon overworld for whatever reason, but we would get to see what it would look like in modern visuals. It would almost be like a remake of Prime 1 for just that one section, or Fendrana Drifts or something, you know?
My heart.
Yeah,
or what about
really cool.
What about going to planet Zebes?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So Dave, what's your next one?
All right. So getting with that. So I have a slightly different kind of imagination on this part. Like, all these things could be wrong. They could just make it completely like Metroid Prime 1 and whatever. We'd probably be happy with it. But my idea, I've been thinking about this for a while. I would really like, this is just for me, nobody could agree, but I would really enjoy, I think, being able to actually fly Samus's gunship. You know what I mean? Like, actually have control over it in certain parts of the game. And this kind of goes along with the traveling from planet to planet kind of aspect that they were flirting with in Metroid Prime 3. I think it would be really cool to have maybe certain sections where you would have maybe you could explore and scan certain areas in your gunship as you're flying around and then finding a place to land and things like that, and actually have the ability to destroy things with your gunship. Also, maybe pieces of the planet or of rock or whatever to open up a new area. Something. Or even maybe fight a space pirate. like in their ship on your way to a planet. Like because Samus does have a ship, and she just basically is using it to go from one place to another. But it's called a gunship, right? So like there's got to be
it's got guns.
Yeah. so I mean, it's just a thought. I mean, obviously, it wouldn't be something that's huge or like a big game changing thing. But I think it would be really cool to actually like expand a little bit more onto what you were doing inside your ship in Metroid Prime 3. I really like that. I really like being able to like interact with my ship and like push buttons and stuff, and then hey, let's go over here and go over there.
Yeah.
I think it'd be really cool if they did that to a certain extent in Metroid Prime 4, and if they did have multiple planets to go to and explore, that would be a perfect opportunity to do that in between the searching of these areas. And then maybe you would have upgrades to your ship you could do as well. Hey, you need this upgrade to unlock this certain area of this planet with your ship, that kind of thing. I mean, obviously this game is going to be big, so we might as well just throw like the kitchen sink in there, right? So this could be a 30-hour long game, basically.
Well, and people have been asking for gunship stuff for a while, so I don't think that's a crazy thought. I think it could be really cool, and I think that Nintendo and Retro would probably be open to it.
Yeah, and imagine, I just thought of like fighting bosses in that gunship, not to the extent that Batman Arkham Knight did, where like every boss was on that freaking Batmobile.
With the Batmobile.
That was so annoying. But like, like one or two bosses in that gunship, maybe like Mega Kraid or something. Just bring Kraid back. That's all I'm saying.
Well, you know what it makes me think of is Star Fox Adventures. I don't know if you guys played that game on the GameCube.
I have not, but I know they had the flying segments in them.
Yeah, and it's kind of, Dave, just like almost what you said. Like, it's really only when you're flying from one planet to another. There's like a 48-second little quick Star Fox level. And I mean, they would obviously want to do it way better, but that template kind of just got in my head as you talked about it.
Right.
And it could be a neat way to incorporate some shooting, and it also makes me think of Halo. Which one did that? Halo Reach, I think. Yeah, yes, Reach had like a flying shooting section.
I mean, there's been rumors that's been going way back since 2012 that Retro was trying to do some type of Star Fox Metroid crossover, even back then.
Oh, yeah, I remember. Yeah.
So there may be something they want to flirt with actually flying your gunship in this game. We got to consider that. And but I definitely trust them that they would do it justice. Like maybe you would even have a boss fight where you're starting on the ground as Samus, and you're fighting the boss, and you got to jump in your ship because then maybe they're trying to escape. You got to go chase them up to the stars and fight them up there a little bit, and take care of them.
Oh, that could be awesome. So let me ask you guys this then. And I mean, I'm totally into the idea, don't get me wrong, but I'm curious if you guys think that there might be some people who would push back against it. Could you see people being less into it? Like, Nintendo, what are you doing? Samus is supposed to be alone on her feet, running around with her arm cannon. Now you're making it a Star Fox shooter game.
I definitely think there would be pushback on the idea of it. Like, oh, they're going to put flying in there? How dare they? But with all these games, it's all about the execution, right? Like, you want to see like how they actually, if it's seamless and it makes perfect sense, they're not forcing the like now you have to go on your ship because. And like, dude, I just came all the way over here and I unlocked this cool little area, and now I got to go on my ship. What are you doing, Retro?
That's where I could see people being like, it could remind me. And again, I'm on board, so I'm not trying to talk about me, but it could remind me of how a lot of people hate the fact that is her name Ashley in Resident Evil 4 when she's like stuck with you for a section, and people feel like they're forced to do something for a whole section of the game that they don't want to do. And so I just wonder if people would maybe have that, unless they make it something where, kind of the way you described it, like what if you could do it almost completely optionally? Like what if you can just, at the time that you felt you wanted to get whatever advantage it would get you, whether it's moving somewhere fast or whether it's, you can only get certain upgrades or items from enemies that you kill in your gunship. So you can just go to certain like landing points, just like how Prime 3 had. And when you would get into your ship, one of the things you could do would be to take off into the air and fly around the planet, kind of like what Starlink did a little bit.
Yeah, so it's sort of like No Man's Sky. I was thinking of No Man's Sky too. Like,
yeah,
if that were the case. Yeah, like that would be, of course. They would have to, of course, have to design around that, not make it like. I don't think this game's going to be open world per se, but because Metroid has very deliberate level design. I could be wrong. They could probably be making an open world, but But I'm thinking if they were to make it so Samus could fly around in her ship, that could probably be its own area too, not necessarily the same area you're walking on with your boots on the ground. But I think I'm totally on board with any flying that they want to do in this game.
Well, one idea I have also that they could implement is, say they introduce the flying aspect as a gradual process in the game, and then like you're using it just to go around the planet a little bit, maybe to land certain areas and maybe unlock little paths here and there, and then by the end game, then you have full access to be fully exploring at your leisure. Like you can do whatever you want at the end game, basically as your reward for maybe upgrading your ship or doing certain things with your ship. Now you have full access to travel wherever you want to go in your ship at that point. I don't think people would have a problem with that.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of what they did with the light suit in Prime 2, where once you get the light suit, you can travel throughout the whole map and the whole game. And it's like right at the, the very end of the game. So it's like the last like 10% of the whole experience. But it's almost like you earned that ability at the end. You've gotten so many upgrades, so powerful. You've finally gotten the elusive light suit, and now you get this cool thing that makes it easier to traverse. And maybe, like you're saying, the gunship could kind of become that version, which could be really cool.
Like maybe you don't. Yeah, maybe you don't need to have actually at that point like a quick travel. Maybe you can just use your ship. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
that would be kind of cool. I mean, it depends on how they implement it, though.
It does, but I mean, really, people have. I mean, for like 2 years, I think we've all heard people talk about, bring the gunship. We want space combat and stuff in the game. So I think it could be really cool. I would be totally into it. Okay, so Joey, what's the next one you have on your list?
All right, so this one has to do more with the story and the general atmosphere of the game. I do agree that Prime 4 should play it a little more safe this time, because Metroid's always like a franchise like on its last legs every time a new game comes out for some reason. Yeah. But this is the first 3D Metroid game in a long time, so I think they definitely need to play it a little more safe here. But as for the story, I don't think it should have nearly as much story as Metroid Prime 3 did. But I think one way they could really expand upon the story and make it more immersive is, and this goes back to me playing BioShock again, like having like those logbook entries, maybe having some of them voiced too. Yeah, like how we found those Galactic Federation troopers, those dead transmissions and stuff. It's just like you could probably get even more, you could probably be affected more emotionally if you actually hear them being voiced. So something to think about there. And I also just love voice acting in video games when it's done right. And I think Metroid Prime 3 had some pretty solid voice acting as well. But I think the best way to do that for Prime 4 would to be have it make it more of a passive type of experience than you're just talking to this character who's like got cracking one-liners and stuff like that, like good old Rundis over there. I love Rundis.
Good old Rundis.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like StarCraft 2 does that really well. How they really accentuate the voice on the text and everything. They have really powerful voice acting in that game. But as far as even for just reading the mission logs in that game, that's a good example to follow. Like if you're reading a text, you want to make it sound interesting. So I agree. I mean, they could do something there for sure.
Yeah, and I didn't like how you had to really just pause the game essentially and read them. I think having that, having the voice acting would let you play the game as you. You
mean like an audio log? Like I know what you mean now. You like in BioShock, like you pick up a tape and you're just walking around while it's playing. Yeah, that would be huge.
Right now I'm playing Crysis 3 and they have audio logs too, but you got to pause and listen to them like on the pause screen.
Ooh,
and I'm like,
yeah,
gross.
Right.
Gross. Yeah. How mid 2000s? Oh my god. Yeah, I like the idea. It's this kind of had to do with what my last thing was going to be, but I can change that to something else, because in general it sounds like the concept is like the delivery of the story. How much story do we have in the game, and what story is there? How is it delivered? Are there NPCs, and if so, do they talk to us, or is it just based on scanning and lore like in the prior games, and then how do we get those? And I do think that a huge focus they need to have with Prime 4 is how to do that. And part of it is like how much story there is. And it makes me think of something I've said for a while is I don't think that Metroid really, like the franchise, I don't think it really has story so much as it has lore. And I think that how they deliver the lore to the game is going to be the key. So I don't mind the NPCs in Prime 3, and you guys know I'm one of the last people on the planet that even likes Other M, which has way more story and NPCs than anyone could ever want, and I didn't even hate that. So
Remember me?
Remember
No.
me? Yeah, no, who are you? And so, like, I'm not necessarily opposed to them doing that, but I do think there's something very succinct about them finishing the Prime quadrilogy now, if it remains a quadrilogy, without having to shove a bunch of that in your face and just making it about the lore. And, you know, the audio logs playing that way, to me, that's like I definitely want them to do it. That's a little bit more quality of life than it is something that's like, I need to make the game like better. But it definitely will make it much more modern and less cumbersome to play through. Because like you said, Joey, pausing to listen to things like that when all you want to do is walk around, it's weirdly frustrating. You feel so shackled when that happens.
Yeah, and I got a feeling this is going to be like a 30-hour long game too. So if you're like on the 25th hour and you got to read your like 100th log there, sit there and just read it, you're just like, nah, just like give me an audio clip, please do something.
Do you guys think that they could maybe make the whole game without any true cutscenes and just make it with the exception of like, oh, here's the boss cutscene, you know? But like,
I think they can do it.
Yeah, and just rely on that lore and stuff that you scan or whatever.
Yeah, maybe. I also think like maybe they'll throw in flashbacks here and there. I don't know. I picture something like that. Kind of like
that. Yeah, those flashbacks give me Other M flashbacks, which is all about flashbacks.
Exactly.
So I don't mind that, but Joey, do you mind it?
Not to the extent of Other M. Like I didn't think, like, aside from them just, you know, being poorly voice acted and everything about them, but you know, just not to not cram my face with flashbacks every 10 seconds or so, you know.
Well, I mean, as long as they make it, if it makes sense to do, if it makes sense to do a flashback or a cutscene, then go ahead and do it. But I don't have any problem with cutscenes as far as transitional cutscenes, like your ship's coming in or you're going out this way and the boss comes in, that kind of thing. I don't mind cutscenes like that at all, because those can be really effective to show what the boss is all about too. But as far as cutscenes are concerned, though, in Metroid Prime 3, they sure had a lot more than Metroid Prime 2 and 1 did.
Oh, yeah.
So I didn't really, they didn't really add anything for me as far as the gameplay was concerned. It kind of like actually decreased my sense of isolation. Because I know everyone talks about isolation, but it is a big part of Metroid. Like, I did my full playthrough of Super Metroid on my channel like a month ago or so, and that isolation in the game, just in the 2D aspect, is just so powerful. And so I do think they need to focus on that a little bit more so than Metroid Prime 3 did. I think, just in my opinion.
I think with Prime 3, what they were probably trying to do is, I think that they were trying to modernize it for what modern was in 2007, when you know the HD systems were pretty new. They were only like a year or two old, the 360 and the PS3, and we had already gotten like Uncharted and Gears of War and stuff at that time. And, you know, Halo, yeah. And so you almost have to, well, and to be fair, even though I think it's far better, Metroid Prime 2 in many ways was also a little bit of an answer to Halo. And I think that with Prime 3, they kind of did the sort of the next step while still maintaining being a Metroid game, which means it's better than all of these franchises. But I think that when you remind yourself of like the climate that the games were releasing in, it's really interesting. And like for all of us who were old enough to remember that, it makes a lot of sense because we remember what that is. There could be people listening who weren't old enough to remember how different it felt when like the HD systems were pretty new and Gears of War was like a industry-shattering release in terms of everything about the production value. And Metroid Prime 3 comes out on the standard definition motion Wii that we all liked. It's a great console and the game is phenomenal, but Nintendo had to try in different ways to make the game maybe feel a little bit more relevant. And I think that the cutscenes and the voice acting and the NPCs was part of it. They're like, can we also make our Metroid game, you know, somewhat cinematic, the way other games are becoming really cinematic? And if that makes sense to you guys, that's the way I kind of saw that.
Yeah, and I do think there's going to be some of that in this game as well. Like, hey, we're Retro Studios, and we're going to show we can still do something pretty cinematic, but maybe less of it as far as in your face, like voice acting. And here's a character, and my name is whatever, and I'm your best friend from the past, and you know.
Remember me?
No.
So you don't want Other M2 is what you're saying.
Exactly.
You know what? I like Other M, and even I don't want Other M2. So at least in that one respect.
I mean, if they came out with Other M2 along with Metroid Prime 4 as separate at the same time, then that'd be fine. I don't care about that. But don't make that your focus.
For sure. And I'm not about to turn this into an Other M podcast unless you guys want me to. But what I will say is
Don't do it.
I won't do it. I just will say that I've long said that with Other M, I know there's things that aren't the best and weren't the best executed, but I think there's a lot of good foundational stuff that they could build on if they ever did want to make another game that was like a sequel or a continuation in terms of game design, not so much like the story, but just the design.
Yeah.
I think that there's building blocks with that game.
Just real quick, another M. I actually liked that game, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
I did like
Dave,
the
high
game.
five.
I liked it. The thing was, it just didn't do it for me as much as I would have wanted it to, and the game gets a lot of hate because of just it not being this amazing, phenomenal breakthrough game that it was supposed to be. So the game gets overly hated, and I do think the game is a good game. It just has a lot of flaws that hold it back, and especially what was it, like 8 hours of cutscenes? I think it's about 8 hours.
Is there really 8 hours? Good Lord.
It's probably, I bet it's not. Okay, I'm going to end up looking that up when we have a free minute. There's
a YouTube video that has all the cutscenes on there. I think it's like 6 hours. I could be wrong.
I'm looking it up. I'm looking it up right now.
Okay, good. Yeah, because that's what I wanted to look up was I knew there was a YouTube video out there of it. And it's a shame because, like, honestly, those cutscenes, even though the story and all the stuff wasn't the best, like, in terms of just, like, the technical aspect, they were really pretty and really impressive for the Wii.
Guys, there's only 2 hours of cutscenes. Relax.
There you go.
Oh, is it only 2 hours? Okay.
Yeah.
There you go. That's not so bad. So anyway, back to Metroid Prime.
It just felt like 8 hours. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. The baby. Back to Metroid Prime 4. I think we're on the last round of the 3 here. So
yes, we are.
So I was going to... I wonder if I could still get my story-related one out since we talked about it. I think we can, yeah, because we didn't really touch on this aspect. So... Even though I said I don't really find the Metroid game franchise to really be about the story, it's more just about the lore of the world and the history of the Federation and the planets that she goes to, there still is some story. And if there was a story I would like to see discussed or to justify why a Metroid Prime 4 is being made, is I would like for the story to focus a lot more on the Chozo. Because that was a huge part. It was like the main part to the first game and to what Samus was discovering on Talon 4. And, you know, she has the mythology of Metroid is that she was raised by the Chozo alien race. She has a connection to them, you know. And I think that when you play Metroid Prime 1 and you search through Talon 4 and you find all of these cool statues and the Chozo ghosts, you know, the ones who are enemies, and you read all that lore from what the Chozo were, I just think that there's so much there to still explore. And I think that if I could pick the Chozo story, it would probably be the origin of the Chozo. I've said that on a lot of the live streams that I've done before. I would love for Prime 4 to explore that. They could do, like, you know, maybe they do a different Metroid game in a couple of years that's not a Prime game, and they could make that about the Chozo, which could be cool. But I think since Metroid Prime 1 kind of started the story and the journey of Samus and the Chozo, I think there's something, like, you know, poetic and cool about coming back for Prime 4 and having that Chozo element of the story continue, or even finish it. Maybe Samus wraps it up in whatever way Retro wants to tell us it wraps up, and just kind of explore a little bit more of who the Chozo were and why they're so important to Samus. So, what do you guys think?
And there's your subtitle for the title right there. Metroid Prime 4 Origins. Done.
Oh my God.
This has been the video. Thank you all so much for watching.
Please subscribe to all our channels. Good night.
Metroid Prime 4 Odyssey.
Oh my gosh. And that would be 3 Odysseys in the industry at that point.
Metroid Prime 4 Breath of the Wild. I'm sorry. Let's, I think the story, that idea is really cool. And I think when I brought up flashbacks, I was also thinking of that because Zero Mission had those flashbacks in them. Like, you know, they were still pictures and whatnot. But yeah, like if they're going to explore anything, explore the origins of Samus. Like talk about how truly messed up Ridley is for eating her parents. And
yeah, bring that lore into the game, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think that's because they tried to establish that pretty well in the first game, and they kind of got away from that by the third game a bit. So I think they should go wrap it right back around and make it more of a focus in Prime 4. And they may be making this a 7-game series, because this may be start of a new trilogy, possibly. We don't know, but I mean, usually that's what they do when they go to a number 4. They make it into 6. So we'll have to see what they do with that story. It could be pretty interesting.
A 7-game series? Are you counting Federation Force?
I mean, oh no, I'm sorry.
Pinball.
6-game series.
Oh, okay.
Pinball, of course, obviously.
Metroid Prime Pinball.
Metroid Prime Hunters.
Yeah. Oh, true.
Yeah. See,
true.
there's so it's going to be like a 12 game series by the time all is said and done.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think.
I don't know why I said 7.
And
yeah.
it's tricky because I mean I've thought about this so much, and I came to the Chozo thing because when Metroid Prime 4 was announced, I was like, what? Like, they ended the story. Like, I don't care about the Silux tease at the end. Forget that. Who cares? I mean, the story ended. Like, the plight with the space pirates and the Phazon, yeah, and Metroid Prime, that entity, and Dark Samus, like, ended. So I'm glad that there's a Metroid Prime 4, but I never would have suspected the next Metroid game would be Prime 4 because I thought the story ended. So we get the confirmation it's Prime 4, and I'm like, okay, well, what the hell is the story going to be? And so then, you start racking your brain trying to figure out what makes sense. And I would cry like a fanboy in the streets, in a good way. I mean, if Dark Samus was somehow in this game, I want her so badly. But beyond that, like, and then, yeah, Silux is probably going to be, one of the main foes, antagonists in this game. Like, they planted that seed, so they have to deliver. But the big picture story, I was like, it's got to be like the Chozo. Like, let's come back to the Chozo.
Yeah, and with the Prime name, I think that has more to do with the style of game that it is, more so than the story itself. Because, like, Prime Hunters, there was no Phazon in Hunters. There was, Prime Federation Force, of course, like, the Phazon's been gone at that point, but it's still directly related to Prime 3. But, yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if they didn't call it Metroid Prime 4. They called it Metroid Prime blank. Because especially, yeah, I don't know, maybe. It depends on if they release the trilogy or not. Just do it, Nintendo. God! Anyway, but...
Well, it may be something like how Final Fantasy has become Final Fantasy. It's just like, okay, who cares? It's called Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe you think, like, maybe Metroid Prime could be that. Just it's a first-person Samus game, so it's called Metroid Prime kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Think like an anthology.
How you identify with it. Yeah.
That could be interesting, because I do think that you guys are right. Like... I think that maybe, we're some of the few people that thinks that deeply about this stuff. When most people hear Metroid Prime, I think that you're probably right. The average person just thinks, oh, first person. I think that's the only thing only place their brain goes. And
the interesting thing about that too, Rob, is that if that is going to be the case, what they could actually do with future Prime games is actually make the story be around the Super Metroid time frame. They could do anything they want at that point.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've had some people ask me in my live streams too, because Metroid is always 90% of my live streams, like when Prime 4 could take place. And a couple of times it's come up, the idea of them moving it around. Like, we know Primes 1, 2, and 3 take place between Metroid 1 and Metroid 2 on the Game Boy. But what if they did something totally wacky with Prime 4 where, we kind of joked about it earlier, but what if they really did move it, like, way into the future? Like, it could happen around Super Metroid. It could happen after Fusion, which would make it the farthest in the timeline. Like, what's to say that there's not, like, a 20-year gap in time, 10, 20 years between the end of Prime 3 and where Prime 4 picks up? Like, they could do that,
Yeah, and this game could actually decide the fate of Metroid.
Oh, man.
The future of Metroid.
Dun, dun, dun.
Scary.
Yeah. The fate of the story of Samus is going to be decided. Will Prime become Prime, or will it just be another Metroid?
Plot twist. You didn't play it. You haven't been playing as Samus the whole time.
Oh my God! Could you imagine?
Oh, you are Dark Samus.
Yeah.
Whoa, hey man, I want a Dark Samus game so badly. I'm into it.
You start the game as Samus, and then you play as Raiden for the rest of the game.
Don't do that. Don't do that to us, Joey.
It'd be better than having Shadow Fox. What was it? That Shadow the Hedgehog? It'd be better than that.
Oh, yeah. Shadow. Yeah.
Could you imagine Samus saying "damn" every second?
Dude,
Where's that
and pulling
damn mother brain?
She pulls out a handgun. She's like, "What's up, B?"
Gotta go
Dark
fast.
Samus
These
the
are our
Hedgehog.
dreams.
Yeah.
Where did
yeah.
we go? What were we talking about? I
Yeah,
forgot.
we really spiraled on that one. So that's story stuff. Dave, what's the next one you have?
All right, so my last one that we're going to talk about for me is going to be the stuff I've been reading about with what they're working on with the game, because with current gen consoles they've been doing lots of physically based rendering stuff with the graphics, and that's what Retro Studios is going to implement in this game. It's confirmed. It's already that's what they're working on, and so with physically based rendering graphics, that's basically how you manipulate the game world. So what I'm really looking forward to is how this game world that we're going to be interacting with is going to be more interactive. Like we have an example like Uncharted 4 and Shadow of the Tomb Raider. How you interact with mud, like mud physics on the ground, actually affects your gameplay. And that's what physically based rendering does. It changes the physical aspects of the game world that you can actually manipulate yourself and interact with them in the game. So if they're doing that in Metroid Prime 4, I think that'd be really exciting. Maybe you could have, certain parts of the levels or certain parts of the areas you go in, like the water, the ice, the mud, the dirt, what have you, could actually affect your gameplay in ways never done before in the Metroid Prime game.
Yeah, when I played those new Tomb Raider games, when I played not the first Tomb Raider, but the 2013 reboot, I was like, this is the ground basis for like a really, really good Metroid game. Hopefully Nintendo comes out with one in 2 years. Yeah, that didn't happen. But yeah, like
not a good one.
Oh man, you hate to see it. But I was thinking that like I'm glad they hired these people who worked on these kind of games, because I look at them and think they're great bases for what can make a great Metroid game in this time, because 2007 feels like it's either like a short time ago, but for me it feels like forever ago. Like, good lord.
I mean, 13 years is really no joke when you think about it.
Like, can you imagine though? Like, say you're fighting a space pirate, and they actually have the ability to hurt you in ways you didn't even think of before. Like maybe they make the ground slip.
That's Ridley's job.
True.
Maybe they have elemental weapons. Maybe they're shooting like oil slick at you or like ice at you, and it actually affects your gameplay in that aspect in the physical world. Because in Metroid Prime 1, 2, and 3, they flirted with that a little bit with ice and like some water stuff, but it wasn't actually physically based rendering where the world can be actually moved in that sense and really affect your gameplay like how they do in some of these current gen games. I think they could flirt with that more, not like overly too much, but maybe like, hey, mud's covering my visor now and I have to wipe it away and I can't, and I'm getting shot at. Or maybe you're slipping down, maybe there's realistic physics where you're slipping down a slope, and it's way more realistic than it was before, and you have to adjust your gameplay mechanics in that sense. It just adds to the immersion of the game. I think that's what I'm looking forward to also.
Well, what I like about it too is it really plays on the fact that the Metroid, specifically the Prime games, they're so about the atmosphere, they're so about the location you're in, and you're always going to so many different kinds of places. You could go to a place that's really muddy and rainy. You could go to a place that's really like hot and foggy and steamy, or a place that's snowy. And what if, and you can tell me, Dave, if this is how it would work when you talk about the physically based stuff. I don't know if this would do it, but like, what if Samus is in like a really muddy place, like a rainforest, swampy area, and if she gets like mud kind of rusting at like the joints in her armor, and so it makes it harder for her to move unless she gets like stuff like that, maybe, right?
Yep, exactly. Or say you're in a lava atmosphere. And actually, you can use the lava to actually melt certain like parts of a area in the game, and you can open up a door that way, and they could actually melt the thing away. Like right in front of your eyes. They could do that with this technology that they use. So it's just adding to the immersion. It's not necessarily something that would really change your gameplay way too much, but it would affect it in certain aspects that would be like really cool.
Those little micro changes are the things that I think that we all notice when we play games, even if we don't notice that we're noticing them, right?
Exactly.
And so those things, they're the kind of things that they don't shine, they don't stand out, and they're not winning awards, but they are doing little things to make the game experience better, you know, in a lot of ways. Provided that, you know, they have to make it fun, because I could also see it being like, oh, Metroid Prime 4, the dumb game where you get muddy and then Samus can't move well. Like, they have to, right, they have to find a way. I think it's a great idea, but provided the game developers know how to make it fun for a video game environment, I think it could be awesome. And do you think this, like, the Switch could probably do this? Is it, like, powerful enough, you think, to handle those kinds of things? Or is that not an issue?
It doesn't really have any games that do that right now.
Well, I mean,
so
what
I can't
about
really tell
Breath
you
of
if
the
it can or
Wild,
not.
though? Doesn't Breath of the Wild kind of? I mean,
got its own
I hear all this
physics
stuff
engine.
about physics. I hear all this stuff about
Well, I
physics,
mean,
and I'm not.
It does physics, but like as far as what you can do with the actual ground and like the dirt and like move things around with it, it doesn't really do that very much.
I see.
I don't know. It's kind of it's an uncharted territory. Uncharted uses it, but it's one of those things like Shadow of the Tomb Raider with Lara Croft. You can use the mud as camouflage, and it actually sticks to her body. So it's like it's one of those things. You know what I mean? Like they can't see you, and obviously you could do it in games like Predator, for example, too. So it's stuff like that modern games are using. To that extent, you could actually use it in a game perfectly for Metroid Prime.
Yeah, and you know they could use it to like a minimal extent, and it would still run on the Switch. Like the Retro and Nintendo, they're wizards on their own hardware.
Yeah,
I'm sure they can think of something. I just hope. I will be slightly disappointed if it doesn't, but I just hope they find some way to make it run at 60 frames per second.
I think they will, dude. Honestly, like I wouldn't even have that worry, because I just feel like the philosophy specifically with Retro and Metroid Prime is 60 frames per second, you know?
Yeah, that's always their goal.
Yeah, I mean, anything's possible, so we might get disappointed and see that that's not the case, but if I was a betting man, I would put my money on it'll be 60.
Watch, first trailer comes out, it's 30, I call you like, why'd you lie to me, Rob?
I lost so much money in Vegas because of you.
Well, I mean, these things are developing on the game could also just be for the aesthetic as well, because the games like Crysis 2 and 3 use physically based rendering, but they don't actually use it in the physical aspect. They use it for how good it looks, basically. So they could be using it in that sense, but because they are hiring guys that are all like super like, you know, AAA like high quality devs that are doing like the top of the line stuff. So they gotta be working on something like that.
I mean,
so.
I feel like, and I've said this in videos and stuff, like, I think that Metroid Prime 4 is going to be the best looking game Nintendo's ever made, right? I mean, I don't know if any of us doubt that, but it has to be, right?
Oh, yeah. Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Well, the people that love cel-shaded graphics and hate realistic graphics are probably going to be like, ew, it's ugly. Realistic graphics don't age well. Look at the first 3 Prime games and tell me that again with a straight face. Like,
well, and here's the thing,
seriously.
though, because, like, I would argue that, and I know what you're saying, but I would argue that the Prime games aren't necessarily realistic. I think that, I mean, they're obviously going for something more, like, more recognizable to what we see in our real world, for sure. But there's definitely, like, an art direction. There's, like, a tone that they chose to go with. And, like, I mean, everything about the geometry and the locations, it just says that to me, and, like, even the character models. So I feel like we're just going to see, like, the super dope 2022 version of, like, that same thing, unless they use a different engine. And I mean, we don't know what kind of engine they're really going to use. I think people think it's Unreal 4, but also Retro has their own proprietary engine, I think, right, for those 3 games. So would they make their own souped up one for this?
They're hiring a bunch of guys who worked on CryEngine, so they could be using some proprietary engine based off of that. Who knows? It's just from who they're hiring. These guys are all like super like CryEngine experts, so they could be using something proprietary like that. And Unreal Engine 4 has been not running very well on the Switch. The Outer Worlds, cough, cough. So.
Yeah, good lord.
So it may not even be based on that, really. So who knows?
Yeah, and you know, my final point is all about this. Actually, my final point is my final wish is I want the art style to be like an evolution of Metroid Prime 3's art style. Because man, like that game, like we're talking the Wii was barely more powerful than a GameCube, but you couldn't tell that looking at this game and comparing it to Prime 1 and Prime 2. It just looks so good. And I think, and if I had to compare the kind of art style they're going to go with for this game, this being the first HD Metroid game in general, I'm comparing it a lot more to like how Halo 4 and Halo 5 look. they're very, of course, they also had a lot of people from Retro Studios go over to 343 Industries, but that kind of style is somewhat of a combination of cell shading. It does look cartoonish in some areas, but it also looks absolutely gorgeous and somewhat realistic in those areas. You can tell they took a lot of creative liberties with how the game is saturated, how it's lighted, and I think lighting is like key in how good this game is going to look.
Big time.
Yeah, I like that. It's interesting how you focus on like the art direction aspect, is what it sounds like. So, is that like? Let me ask you this then. I guess what parts of Metroid Prime 3 really like stood out to you that kind of drove that point home to you? Like, I like what they did with Prime 3 specifically, and I want to see that move on. Like, what aspects is it?
Man, look at Elysia. That town,
yeah,
that whole area is just like, like, good lord, it's so beautiful. It's got great music in the background. Like, I know, what was his name? Kenji Yamamoto, I think he's the creator of the music. His music is just fantastic. I'm sure he'll come back for Prime 4. And even Brio also, like, all of Prime 3 just looks incredible. like if there's any planet that's kind of forgettable, it's Norion, but that's basically because it's just one giant base.
Yeah, and that's just a very small kind of beginning section. I mean, you do go back to it, I think, if I remember right, but you don't really. There's not much there. It's all.
Elysia Skytown is breathtaking. It was absolutely. That was like the best looking area in the game, in my opinion. That in HD, even that just in HD would look amazing. Just by itself.
My god, right? Yeah, it would be. Well, and that's all about. I mean, that kind of stuff is so much about just the architecture of like the places that you're going to, and like they went for like such a steampunk design, and there's not a lot of places to move around in Elysia, so that's like the weird thing about it. You feel kind of restricted, but like visually for sure. And I also think like when I think of the visuals of Prime 3, I also think of like the bloom lighting that they added to that game and how effective it was to her suit, and especially in a place like Elysia with all these little lights, just kind of blinking and popping, and the little robots like using their welder, and the bloom lighting popping off of all these things. It just really just popped. It just stood out.
It just makes me get really excited for Metroid Prime 4.
Yeah. God, like, we talk about our wishes and stuff, but I haven't really talked about or even like bothered making a list because it's just been so damn long since a Metroid game. I'm just like, whatever you give me. You could give me a game that is just as good as Prime 1. Like, no further like improvements or additions, and I'm just gonna be like, I love it. Oh man, it's been so long.
Just give me something good though.
Well, and
something good, of course.
It's so tricky too because since Prime 3 came out 2007, right, so 13 years ago, probably will be 15 by the time that Prime 4 actually releases, if you think about
Undoubtedly.
I mean, it's crazy when you think about it. And like in that time, this is something else that I had to bring up so many times. We've only had 2 Metroid games release, and they were very divisive. We're talking Other M and we're talking Federation Force. Like probably the only 2, if you want to call them like, I don't want to call them black marks because I actually think both games are good in their own kind of vacuum.
Yeah.
But they are definitely games that you could argue hurt the franchise, or at least didn't help it, and split fans in a lot of ways. And suddenly like Metroid was like this franchise that always reviewed like crazy, and sales were okay, but it was fine, but everyone loved it. And then here come these 2 games, and people are like, we don't like this, Nintendo. Where's the next real game we want? And it's been so long. Well, okay, we get Samus Returns. I cannot forget Samus Returns, which is really, really great to me.
It's so good. I love it.
But with that one exception, we've really just had, 2 out of 3 games in the past 13 years have been really divisive. So Prime 4 has to really deliver in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And I think Retro Studios and Nintendo knows that from who they're hiring on the game. I think they're taking it extremely seriously, and obviously for them canceling the first game, whatever that was, whatever mess that was,
whatever it was,
as a side note, the whole reason why I was so upset when they canceled it was not because of them canceling it necessarily. It was more because of them even going there in the first place. Like, oh, by the way, Retro, you're good. We're going to use someone else. And it's like, no, you can kind of see that happening. It was just really disappointing.
Yeah.
I was the same way. Like, what? It's just like, good on you for being transparent with us. Thanks for doing that. And thanks for letting us know. Don't expect this game for a while. But also, why didn't you just give it to Retro?
Yeah, what were
why
you-
did you do that?
It's so funny. It's like at the end of the day, all paths lead through Retro. So clearly, that's the place that you just should have gone in the first place. You know?
It could be Retro said no, maybe at first, because they were working
Very
on something
true.
else that didn't pan
That's
out.
fair point.
But yeah.
Star Fox was so important to them.
Yeah.
Yes, Star Fox Racing.
Guys,
Where
we
is
have
that?
we have this vision for this racing game with Star Fox. Okay, that's what we want to do.
Yeah.
So let's end this on just like one last simple question. Okay, just kind of for fun, we'll end this here. Do you guys suspect? And I think Joey, you and I have kind of gone back and forth on Twitter, sort of talking about this in the past year or so. But while we're here talking in person, do we think that there's a chance that Metroid Prime 4 releases on the next console, whether it's cross-gen or only on the next console? What do you guys think?
I think yes, for sure.
I think if it is going to come out
Cross-gen.
on the next console, it's cross-gen. Yeah, like you said, because right now they're working on Switch hardware with this. I don't think Nintendo has dev kits for the next console, which would come out in 2 years? And
Theoretically,
yeah, theoretically, we don't know what's going on.
Yeah, we
but
don't know. Yeah.
I feel like it could be a good thing to have a Metroid game launch on a new console, because people are looking for games to play on their new console, and then here's this really good looking space shooter that I may or may not have played previous entries of, so maybe we'll take a look at that. But also, it was way safer to launch Zelda with a Nintendo console, so who knows? But if anything, I'm expecting this game by 2022, I think, is the safest bet. A lot of people think it's 2024, and I'm like, no.
I don't think so. I don't know.
Yeah, and you're right though. You want to maximize sales too. So if the Switch is 5 years old and they're already moving to the next console, then you don't. I mean, it may not be too smart just to release it on the old one. You want to get more sales releasing it on something fresh and sexy looking,
Yeah, there's an advantage to both for sure. And I will say though, because Joey, you brought up the point about they're building this on Switch hardware, which is true, unless it's not, and we just don't know it, to be fair. But we assume that it's we'll go on the
unless it's not.
Yeah, I mean, because like what if you think about it. I just have to put this out here now that we're even talking about it. It was only a year ago, all right? So 2019, they decided to delay and restart the game. They restarted the game. But if in 2019, they know that 2022 is when they want their new console to come out, they've already got that hardware planned. So what if they were like, you know what? It's not working out. Bandai's not working, or whoever this team is. We're going to give it to Retro, and we're already, really far into the development of our next console. So Retro, we want you to just start it over on the new stuff. I'm just going to say it could work out that way time-wise. I don't think it, but I just wanted to put that out there. So, but if we step away from that, I will say, if we go on the assumption that they're on Switch hardware, we have to remember that Pikmin 3 started off on Wii hardware and still ended up released only on the Wii U. So they have done that in the past.
I didn't know that.
Also, we have to keep in mind too, these games are all built on PCs anyway. So whatever they decide to do could be something later anyway. They may be like, okay, we got to make this work on the Switch, but then like in 2021 or whatever, they'd be like, you know what? We're just going to make it work on this next console. That could be the plan right now. Who knows?
Well, you also mentioned like Pikmin 3 started out on Wii and went to Wii U, but also they did not announce Pikmin 3 for Wii. They announced Metroid Prime 4 for Nintendo Switch.
That's true.
I mean, like Miyamoto said in like an interview, like we're making Pikmin 3, but you're right. They never said that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's very interesting, this whole thing, and who knows when we just gotta see this game by next year. If we any longer, I'm gonna lose it. Like, see it, not have it released, but give us a trailer, give us a screenshot. Anything.
What if you see it this year? What would you do? Would you blow up?
Do you have insider info?
Would you just explode, Joey? Would you just blow up?
Who knows?
I'd subscribe for that. No,
that's the only reason. That's the only reason we subscribe. Once he blows up, I'm unsubscribing. Okay, I've seen what I came for.
Entertainment.
Damn it.
No, yeah.
Just like a Spinal Tap's drummer.
Exactly.
That would be a dream come true if we actually saw the game like as a preview this year. That'd be awesome, but. We still need to see Metroid Prime Trilogy, right? So
we do.
We also need to see Metroid 5 because we know that's happening this year. Totally.
I honestly,
Dread?
Yes.
Well, yeah, Dread. I made a theory video about this like probably a year and a half ago. It's one of my most viewed videos, And it was the theory that what if Metroid Dread became Metroid Prime 4? And so what if the subtitle to Metroid Prime 4 is Dread? Metroid Prime 4 Dread. You know, you got Echoes, Corruption, and Dread.
What if Dread is just... I also think Dread is kind of, the Snyder cut of Metroid. So, and I thought that before they officially announced the Snyder cut. So I'm like, well, this could happen then.
Yeah, let's just go with that and hope that it actually happens. Release the Dread game. Hashtag
Yes.
release
That name just reminds me of Sylvester Stallone. I'm sorry.
Of Dredd, yeah.
With Judge Dredd.
I am the law.
I am the law. I think we've covered the gamut here. We've really, and this was only a fraction of the list that I think we probably had of stuff we could talk about.
Yeah, remember we were going to make it 10 each, and I'm glad we didn't do that.
Yeah. And let's not forget, we also planned a 30-minute podcast, and I knew way ahead of time it wasn't going to be 30 minutes. I was
No
like,
way.
there's no way.
No.
Sounded good. I was like, if we plan for 30, we'll make it for about an hour. I'm sure that's what'll happen. So,
Yeah, definitely.
so yeah, this has been a good-spirited Metroid chat. Got some good ideas out. So I'm going to thank you guys. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Joey. I mean, the three of us just sort of put this together, and I think we've decided it will be up on my channel. But it's not like it's my cast. We kind of did this, the three of us all together here.
We'll have to do it again when maybe we get some actual news, too, to talk about.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, God. When they re-release the Metroid Prime 4 logo, like, there's another 2 hours right there.
Whoa, the
Talking
four
about
is
how
the
four is
looks-
green
four looks
now.
amazing.
Yeah.
You know what else was green? The Blast Ball logo. Oh, no.
Oh no.
Metroid Prime 4 Blast Ball Part 2.
Oh my
Can't
god.
wait.
Ooh.
That needs to be its own spin-off game. They did a pinball game. They could just do a blast ball game. So
Yeah.
yeah, but since this will be on my channel, I'm going to make sure to link your guys' channels and stuff below. So you guys probably already know Joey and Dave's channel, but definitely please check it out. Thank you guys again so much for joining, and thanks to everyone for tuning in. And I guess with that, we'll just sign out until we see the game in 7 years.
You can't wait.
Awesome.
Bye-bye.